All right, welcome to PodMagic, real conversations about solving real IT challenges. I'm your host, Bruce Kornfeld, Chief Product Officer at StoreMagic, and we are always exploring ways how simple, reliable technology can help benefit you and the people you serve, whether that's retail stores, branch offices, manufacturing sites, hospitals, anything you might be doing out there in the on-prem world. My goal is to bring interesting guests, deliver some value, and have fun along the way. So let's dig in. I'm very excited today. I haven't talked to Molly in a little while, but Molly, Molly Presley is here. I'll do a quick intro and then we'll dive in. Molly is the head of global marketing at Hammerspace and the host of the Data Unchained podcast. She's very famous if you don't know that already. She's a veteran product and marketing leader in the data storage and infrastructure space. And Molly and I have known each other for too many years. I'm not going to say the number because I don't want to reveal our ages, but Molly and I go way back. So welcome, Molly. Thanks for joining.
It's great to be here and so good to see you, Bruce.
Same. All right. So listen, we have a lot we could talk about. I don't actually know where the conversation will meander to, but let's just start off with why don't you pretend that I don't know what Hammerspace does, even though I know a little bit, but just explain to me and anyone else out there listening what Hammerspace is and what you guys do and what problems you solve.
Yeah, you bet. So, Hammerspace, if you kind of take a step back and think about why on earth even that name, it's kind of a unusual name. If you're into anima, comics, anything like that, that's actually where the name originated from. And whatever you think of, whether it's Mary Poppins purse and she's pulling all these things out of this very small purse, or it's in this recent Spideyverse movie, he literally they use the term he pulled his big hammer out of his hammer space. It's the magical place where very large things can come from a very small area. So infinite size things can come out of a very small area. And that was the founding term around our company name, which is makes it easy to remember us that essentially imagine you have all this unstructured data, petabytes, exabytes, whatever you have as an organization, is in a whole bunch of locations, but you really just want to use it as a single entity. That's Hammerspace. Interact with all those sites and all that data through one single entity or data platform is what we do.
Got it. Nice. Yeah, the interesting overlap here for us is we're mostly different, but somehow the same in that we focus on small amounts of data at lots of locations, but we do have that overlap about lots of locations. So we'll get into that as we go through here for sure. So let's just start off with a question around unstructured data. So what do you guys see is like what's broken out there, and what are you doing to help solve some of these unstructured data problems?
Yeah, I'd say that it's less about broken, but more how infrastructure has evolved. That most infrastructure was designed kind of with a one-to-one ratio of use case to data. You bought a Isilon system for your genomics processing. You bought a NetApp for your home directories, and you bought Lustre for your supercomputing. Whatever. I'm just using an example that might sound familiar to the audience. And those data sets were purpose built for their infrastructure for performance, capacity, security, but they're also locked in that infrastructure. And now that we've evolved to a world where maybe you have research scientists and maybe some agentic AI projects that want access to the data that wasn't really designed to be shared with other applications, it's really difficult to get access to data. So what we're really seeing is people in the architectural side of the world, CTOs, data architects, AI architects, are trying to figure out how do I create a many to one relationship of applications and users and locations to my organization data. And then there's just the piece of a lot of that data, and this is probably goes to the broken question a little bit more, is was not real well described. I knew what I created and you knew what you created, but no one else really had any knowledge of those data sets or what they were created for. And so that idea of universal metadata or tagging of data so you can find it if you weren't the original data owner is fairly broken and something that we're needing to solve as an industry.
Yeah, so it seems to me that like there's a whole industry, there's a whole career out there of data scientists, over the last whatever it is, decade or two, their job is to help companies figure all this out. Are you putting data scientists out of work here? Or are they doing different things now? Because it sounds like you simplify this whole thing.
We do, but there's two ways you can think about it. It's kind of like with AI: is AI going to replace you, or is it going to make you better? Is it going to make you more productive as a human? And I suppose that same question could come for data scientists in Hammerspace. That if you think about ETL and that process of, I'm going to go identify a data set, I'm going to extract it to my machine, do some work with it, and then load those results back in. That's very serial. Data scientist one isn't interacting with data science two. They've all pulled their own data sets out and are doing their own work kind of asynchronously. What Hammerspace enables is you can all share the same data set. You don't actually have to extract to do it. You can work within your Hammerspace environment with the same data that maybe somebody else is investigating too, and have access to all the data. Perhaps instead of knowing, oh, I'm going to go get Bruce's data set on certain genomic project, you could search the metadata of all the data from all the people around the world that you have data sets in your Hammerspace, and find the data that might be relevant to your project, and then load it in your Jupyter notebook and do your work. So it's more about taking things that have historically been very manual and human driven. And now that we have so much data and so many needs for data, driving some automation and being able to do things through software instead of through manual processes. So it makes the data scientists more productive.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, one thing I'd like to ask about. Let's talk about the small site situation. I get the sense that maybe a lot of what you do is more kind of big data center. We can talk about that as well, but let's just think about the small sites. Um, one thing that we find at Store Magic, one of our mantras is simplicity, because they don't typically have IT people everywhere. So that everything needs to be super simple. That's on-prem at these smaller sites, and management needs to be somewhere centralized. So, how do you guys think about that? How do you make what you do simple for your customers that have data at all of these sites around the world?
We've done something that seems obvious, but takes a long time to do. That we've built our storage services into Linux. So we have several Linux kernel maintainers that work for Hammerspace. And the storage services you need, things like connecting the client to the storage system, or connecting data to our metadata environment, is built into Linux. And when you think about that, that means any client, whether it's a sensor, it's a vehicle, a telescope, a small remote data center, if you're running Linux, it can be a member of your Hammerspace system. You simply map an IP address, and all of a sudden, as that data is being generated, we're also creating the metadata around that data. And you imagine the power of this, that you don't need a human there. You just have a Linux machine that maps to an IP address, and all of a sudden is a member of this shared data platform. And even more cool, as that data is being generated, there's metadata that's searchable by other people in the organization that can say, oh my gosh, I'm running this project and I'm looking for data that matches certain characteristics. Some of that was just created in this remote data center. I'm going to suck that into my project, and it gives you real time access to that data. So it makes it very easy to connect the data sets into a larger data project, and you don't have to go through a process of replication or manual copy, whatever it is, because the metadata is searchable immediately. And because it's built into Linux, it's very easy. You don't have to even load any software. It's already built into your Linux machine.
Yeah, just going to ask. So in order for your software to work, you don't need the end user does not need to run an agent or anything locally. It just works, or yeah.
Exactly. As long as the machine is on some reasonably modern build of Linux, that's true. Or you can connect, if you're a Windows box, just over like SMB. But for the big data generating systems, those tend to be running on Linux these days.
So Molly, I'm just sitting here thinking, like, with what we do, it is not what you do, right? But we but we create the platform that customers use at all of these sites. We're clear, well, I shouldn't say clearly, but we are Linux based, right? We use a good a good amount of open source software, but we harden it into an appliance. But
Hmm.
at the core of it, it's Linux, right?
Sure.
And then we
Most
create
things
a
are, right?
hypervisor so customers can run whatever applications they'd like to run at their small sites. But it's starting to sound like shame on us for not having this conversation sooner, but maybe there's some overlap here, some go to market opportunities for partnership of helping each
Yeah,
other
absolutely.
help solve customer problems at these small sites. It sounds exciting,
Yeah, it
actually.
sounds like it. Yeah. When you want to connect those small sites to other business units, other projects, that sometimes can get really challenging, is something Hammerspace helps a lot with. And I'll just give you an example of, I was at a conference yesterday called the Trillion Parameter Consortium, which essentially is a bunch of supercomputing and AI people trying to figure out how do we keep going bigger, more, faster, more file sets, more compute, etc. But what they were really trying to figure out is, how do we connect this very distributed world into maybe building a new language model? And that's hard. The language model technology exists and data is scattered all over the place, but that model needs access to the data. And that's really a hard problem to solve. And that was a big chunk of what we were talking about as a committee yesterday, is how do you get the data to the models? There's compliance, there's regulations, there's security, but there's just a lot to it, and unified metadata around all that is a good start to it.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty difficult, challenging technical problem that you guys are in the middle of. So that's exciting. It's awesome.
It is, but it's all about, there's little sites and little data generating sensors and things all around the world that probably have some really interesting information in them that these larger research projects could benefit from if they could figure out how to know what's there.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy what you guys are doing, and it's like I feel like the the world is moving so much faster than it did, back when you and I worked together. Um, things move so fast, and there's so much more data. We've been saying it for years. Like we're both storage DNA in our backgrounds, right? So storage people always talk about the amount of storage doubling every whatever year or two, but it's real, and the amount of content that is out there in the data center, in the cloud, at these edge sites, it's mind-boggling. And someone's going to solve these problems, right? How do you bring all that? How do you get use out of all the data? Hammerspace is doing a lot there. AI is helping. It just seems like the opportunity for innovation is huge for managing data at the edge, which is a problem that we think about all the time.
Absolutely. And, I mean, we're not really here to talk about AI per se, but you think about, every enterprise is trying to figure out what to do with agentic AI right now. And that's, essentially, I want to use my data for some kind of AI tool that will help my company's efficiency. It's, generally how people are thinking about it. Well, how do you know what data you have in your company that you want to load and train on for that agent that's going to do customer support or documentation writing or whatever? Like, these are real problems that every enterprise is grappling with, that they build out the systems for these edge sites and the people and the workflows, but now they're wanting to tap them for something they weren't designed for. And so it's a really interesting challenge that I think every enterprise is thinking through right now.
Yeah, something I always say is like, I would not want to be a CIO. They have hard jobs, right? There's 100 different ways to build your architecture, particularly if you're talking about lots of sites, right? So one thing that, happy to talk about AI a little bit here. Let's do it. So one thing that I think of is, I think what you were saying, the data that's at the remote sites, probably, maybe not all of it, but at least some of it, needs to get to a cloud or a data center somewhere to be part of the models so that more accurate learning can happen. But on the flip side, what we see is that at the edge, when they need to inference and they need to get information quickly, that what we're starting to see customers think about is, let's do inferencing locally for fast decision making. So we're seeing AI happen at the edge, but the bigger models are in the cloud. Do you see the same thing? What do you think's happening? I know this is early days in AI still, but what are your thoughts on how this is going to play out?
Yeah, I do see that um one, what we're doing with AI is changing so so quickly. Inference was all the rage 6 months ago. Now agentic's the rage. Who knows what the next thing will be? But so things are changing fast. But we definitely see we're in. If you think about product category, we're in the data orchestration space, moving data to remote GPUs, remote users, that type of thing, from where the data was generated. But there's also these technologies that are like compute orchestration. So take the container and orchestrate the compute or the inference to where the data sits. And so it's like, do you move your containered workload to your data at the edge? Or do you move your edge data to the model in the cloud? And the one is inference and one is training, really, and organizations kind of need to be able to do both. So yes, we do see both for sure, and it just depends on what problem the organization is trying to solve at any particular moment. But what I think is clear is most of this needs to be done through automation. Okay, if you're orchestrating your containers, you don't want to have to open an IT ticket and have them go do something for you. Or if you're orchestrating a data set, same thing, doing this through automation. So a high level job scheduler can say, I'm doing something. Okay, I'm going to run the inference here and I'm going to run the training here. And that all happens in an automated way is probably the only way to build these infrastructures long term in any kind of sustainable manner.
Yeah, I've got a fun question for you that's related. So think about, I don't know, how long have you been at Hammerspace? I forget, a couple of years maybe?
Almost 4 years.
Four
It was,
years. Okay.
yeah, marketing
Uh,
employee number one,
All right, I'm
at
going to
least
say
full
this
time.
publicly. It's not embarrassing or bad, but I remember where I was. I won't repeat where I was, but I remember I was on a call with Tony Asaro back as I think he started off consulting with the Hammerspace
I believe
team
so. I think
a
that's
long
correct.
time
Yeah.
ago, and I remember him
He was
saying,
consulting with Hammerspace and some of Frank
"Yeah,
Slootman's companies and at
yeah,
some point came on full time here.
yeah." And I remember the conversation about what Hammerspace is and what he's thinking about, and maybe I'm going to join this company back then. So it's pretty exciting to see where you've all gone. But let me just ask you: you've been there 4 years, so think about when you were first hired there. What was going on with data and AI? And think about where you are now. Has AI always been part of what you guys were thinking, or has it just been an evolution of where you're going?
No, it definitely wasn't. So the company has been shipping product for a few years now, but it has been in development for over 10 years and, 150 grand, 150 million of investment and all that. And when David initially, our founder is a gentleman named David Flynn, founded the company, his premise was he and his team at Fusion IO, which he was the CEO of Fusion also, created NVMe and created this decentralized problem. Take NVMe, take SSDs out of big storage systems like SANs, and put them in machines at the edge. And now all of a sudden you've got this big edge data problem. And he took Hammerspace and wanted to solve that problem of how do you unify that when your data processing and creations occurring decentralized. So he was thinking more about like containers and typical IT workloads when he originally designed the technology, like enterprise IT. But then things started to happen in the media and entertainment space and through COVID. And as cloud got adopted more, that other workloads became more decentralized too. Through COVID, visual effects artists all of a sudden weren't local to the studios where they were making films. And HPC, there was this glut, if you think about it a few years ago, of you couldn't buy GPUs, like they just weren't available. And supercomputing sites who historically always put all their compute in one big supercomputer needed to use some burst computing. So workloads have become a lot more decentralized for a lot of very unrelated reasons in the time that Hammerspace has been in business. And through that, at one point, AI became a major driver. And we are a great technology that opportunistically is helping AI workloads a lot. David would say he didn't design the company for, but he's sure glad AI has become so popular.
Yeah, you guys are like the right place at the right time. It's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, let me change topics a little bit. I want to talk about reliability, HA, uptime, whatever word you want to use, because something that we see a lot, and it might be just where we play, is one of our values is figuring out how to help customers keep their operations running at these small sites. So data center technology usually is too expensive and clunky to run everywhere. So there needs to be innovation around how do I keep my applications running reliably at smaller sites. So my question for you is when you talk to customers that have a lot of sites, do you have a conversation about uptime, or is that kind of tangential to what Hammerspace is focused on?
Our conversation generally is not so focused on uptime as much as like continuous data access. And
Data
what I mean by,
availability.
yeah,
Yeah.
data availability. And so, can you build redundancy into my metadata servers that if this cloud region is down or whatever, I can still have my metadata in other locations? So, it's a little bit different, probably, than what you're getting at.
Yeah. And how do you? Another one that we see a lot is the concept of simplicity, because it sounds like your tech is quite deep and could be thought of as complicated. But I assume you've done things to eliminate that. So talk to me about what do you do to help customers use your solutions without having a PhD in data science? What's your simplicity message
Absolutely.
to your
And
customers?
it's a great question. And enterprises want simplicity. They're looking for ways to embark on the next thing they need to do, whatever that initiative is, and do it with as much simplicity as possible. So we do things like building everything into Linux. And I mean like the storage services into Linux. Great, my machine already has it. I don't have to load clients or optimize them. So building things into standards is a big portion of what we do, that while it is very complicated and we have really smart engineers that work things into the Linux kernel and into the NFS protocol stack, for the end user, it's just there. If you know how to connect an application to NFS and your application runs on Linux, it's already there. So it's actually very simple from that perspective. And then when you think about data integration and unifying data sets, whether for research or for analyzing it in Tableau or doing something with AI, um, is much more simple if you get everything into a unified data platform where you can see all your data versus having 10 experts, your NetApp expert, your IT guy, your Isilon expert, your S3 expert, all trying to figure out in like a meeting, how am I going to merge these data sets? So there is complex technology, but the outcome is a very simplified presentation of your data. And deployment wise, a lot of it's already built into Linux. So it's actually much easier than it sounds.
Nice. Sounds awesome. All right. We both have storage in our backgrounds. So let's talk about storage a little bit. So, what would you say when you think about all the different ways that companies can store data on physical things, usually drives of some kind, SSDs, NVMEs, whatever it is? What are you seeing about storage architectures? Are you seeing a change in how people are thinking about storing data? Are they using different technologies? What are you seeing on the storage side of things?
The big crossroads I feel like is happening right now in storage is that historically organizations have bought purpose built, I would call them silos, for different use cases. And use cases could be um, certain feature sets, certain cost models, performance models. And organizations are trying to collapse that to a fewer number of different types of infrastructure that I have to manage, and figuring out, because the scale is so big. Where they had, a petabyte 10 years ago, now they have 10 petabytes, and they can't have 30 systems for their 10 petabytes. It's just like it's not linearly sustainable to continue to do that. So I do see organizations trying to figure out, how can I consolidate my infrastructure strategy? How can I go to standards? Like, I don't want extra networks, like specialized networks for performance or storage backends. I kind of just want to use Ethernet, like, so driving towards standards and simplicity on the number of building blocks a customer needs is a big piece that we see a lot of. And then, as we think about what future data centers are going to look like, and we're short on kilowatts of power, how are we going to make things more sustainable? Governments, certain cities that are really out of power are probably farther ahead on this, but they're also looking at what is the efficiency play, less because of the feel good, I want to be green as a company, but because they realize they don't have access to power. So they're thinking about what is a more power efficient approach to doing the things I'm doing. Those are the two big things I've seen.
So is it fair to say that from a Hammerspace perspective, you don't really care what where the data is stored? You can access it no matter where it is. It sounds like, right?
Exactly. Yep. We
And
don't sell
then
storage. We use
yeah,
whatever storage the customer has
whatever
or
they
wants
have.
to choose.
So if an end user like standardizes on your approach to data management, it just seems like it doesn't really matter to them what the hardware is, as long as it's reliable and has uptime, they would probably be happy. Is that kind of the story?
Yeah, that's generally true. I mean, there's still physical laws. You need enough memory to hold your metadata and your cache. You need enough networking to move the data if you're going to be moving any of your data around. So, there's some basic minimum requirements that you want to meet. Otherwise, you won't be happy. But
Right.
aside from that, yes, that's completely true.
Okay. I think I only have one last question. Let's move off the topic of Hammerspace and Store Magic for a second. How about now? She's worried. Where's this going? No, just how about so in the last since we last worked together, and I won't reveal the number of years. It's been a while. You've been in a few different companies running some combination of marketing and product, similar to what I've done. So tell me, what lessons learned have you had about marketing highly technical products to end users? Any interesting lessons learned about marketing products over the course of your career?
Well, alliances have actually been kind of a fun part of my career. I've kind of become this alliance person where you and
You're
I
good at
got the
that.
Active
You're good at
Archive
that.
Alliance
I do
going. But,
remember.
whether it's
Yeah.
standards committees, we recently launched something called the Open Flash Platform Initiative that, in marketing, trying to just compete against the messaging of your competitors is really hard. Everything kind of sounds the same. I suspect it would be possible to look at Store Magic's website, our website, and Databricks and see a lot of similarities. So finding the ways to get to your end customers, the true difference you have, how you fit into the ecosystem of what they have, not just having the blinders on of I'm selling Hammerspace and that's all I care about. But knowing, they do have computers and they do have networks and they do have other vendors, and making it easier to work together has helped. Certainly, I seem to end out in companies where we're often doing category creation, like on the front end of the innovation curve, where it's a new technology that hasn't existed. And so category creation, having a good understanding of which category do you fit in, and if you don't, what do you do about that? That's an important thing to do. But I suspect you've experienced this too, Bruce. But just like everything else has accelerated so fast, how you market has changed dramatically. Like the best practices on getting people to your website went from SEO to AI bots like overnight. And it's like, oh my gosh, how do we optimize for that? And so I think our world is much more dynamic. So you have to be constantly learning, just like engineers and architects, and marketing, that's true too.
True. Good points. I remember, I'll close with a little story that you are a good salesperson, because I remember when you reached out to me, I was at Dell and you were pitching
Yep.
the Active Archive Alliance. You were kicking this thing off, right? And you were looking for people to join. And I'm thinking, I'm a multi-billion-dollar company. Can I join this thing? And you're like, yeah, just do it. Just do it. I'm like,
You can do it,
okay.
be fine.
To be fine. I don't think I asked permission from anybody, but we just did it. Yeah, it was
And having
awesome.
that
So yeah,
logo was really great, because
it was,
Intel is a powerful logo.
you're good at what you do. You're good at building those alliances, and it worked, right? So, any rate,
It does
all right.
work.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, listen, I'd love to keep talking, but I think I'm going to get the hook here. So, thanks for joining. Appreciate it. Awesome talking with you. So, thanks very
It was great to
much.
get to join your show and get to catch up with you as well, Bruce.
Same here. And then for those of you listening, thanks for paying some attention to PodMagic. Real conversations about solving real IT challenges. And we will see everyone next time. Oh, don't forget, like us, share us, tell your grandma, tell your grandpa, help us get some followers. So thanks very much.